Okay, we're gonna go live again. This was a rebroadcast of something I tried to do yesterday to meet the April 30th deadline or the April 30th date. Um, Somehow or another, I only got 2 minutes of it in. So we're gonna try this again on May 1st. We'll try to do this again sometime in May. But this is Namo Kofi Joke. This is the roof is on fire and awakening kinship is the social media tag that you can go to and see all my socials. You can go to africaonthemove.com and visit me there as well. But we're going to try to rebroadcast the episode that I did yesterday um, with some good stuff. So I'm hopefully I'll be able to remember some of it, remember most of it, and recreate that same flow. All right. So when I get to the 2 minute mark, 2:30 mark, I'm gonna be checking things because that's when the last one went out. And so I don't know if I went not for children or was the reason why, but we're gonna see. So again, we're gonna go through the same format. We're gonna talk a little bit about the geopolitical uh, education that we should learn. We're going to have a lesson on creativity, creation, and then we're also going to try to connect that to the material conditions on which we live and our reality. So let's get started. So this month, I should say not this month, but last month was a very, how could I say, it was a very busy month. There was a lot of things going on, a lot of things happening. Um, we are in the middle of a tremendous economic shift in the world today. And for a lot of us, we may not be realizing that. So I'm going to try to hip you to a little bit of that. So I let you know a little bit about that game. The core of it is that African people must be ready and focused on the economic conditions of Africa. That has been the condition since we stepped foot on this planet, on this side of the hemisphere, the Western Hemisphere, and yet and still we still haven't awakened to that idea. We still haven't brought the type of kinship that we need to have to battle for, to work for, to create for a more prosperous and positive African community. The trade is shifting, or the economic environment is shifting. No longer will America be this empire that is now crumbling, collapsing, declining. No matter how you want to put it, uh, they're on the way out. And as African people, one of the most important things that we need to realize is that, you know, when the Lone Ranger looking for Tonto, Tonto should be looking at the wrong Ranger and said, "What you talking about, white man? This ain't got nothing to do with me." And that's the same way we should be approaching this too. Uh, we have not been in uh, the political realm or economic realm of representing ourselves as a people since the Europeans invaded and the Arabs have invaded Africa. So we have not really been able to organize in a fashion that could bring everybody in, but under some principles and personalities and determinants on African people as a whole. The current situation now, which I'm going to talk a little bit more about as in the months ahead, but it definitely dawns on me over the last day or two that we are kind of in a battle over how we think as a people. On one hand, we have the African building a future. And on the other hand, we have the foundational Black, whatever you want to call it, right? Who tends to think that their interests are tied to the interests of the people. of what they were kind of brought from, or from brought to, arrived to. Uh, I don't share that view. I've always been a person who's kind of felt that we as an African people need to build something. As you can see in the back, we're going to talk a little bit more about those pictures, but they reference the uh, future and what we could do as a people to get more organized. But yes, and yet and still, we have a country that we live in who arms another country to commit genocide against a people that were there before the people who America armed to destroy them. And I think that that is the kind of misinformation that we constantly get in this country that somehow or another we just don't look at correctly. The awakening kinship is always talked about being woke, and even that is under attack. And I guess it's under attack for good reasons, because if African people became aware of their conditions and the consciousness of who they are as a people, it would cause a lot of problems here. So the idea that somebody doesn't want Africans to be woke is, it's understandable, but in a very fearful way of what it might produce, and only fearing that what has been created will somehow not be here any longer, which in a lot of ways is a good thing. But this month there will be some monumental, important dates that Africans should remember. One is African Liberation Day. That's May 25th. There will be some program activities around that. You can Google that. Afri- all African People's Revolutionary Party is putting on some programs, and that we should all be a part of. Also, on May 18th, we will celebrate Malcolm X's 100th centennial birthday. We also be doing that here. We'll be doing that all around the country, and just try to play a part in some of those activities. They're definitely community built, they're community based, and we as a people always need to focus on us. Okay, that is the number one thing, us. Okay, and if anybody tells you any differently, they need to check with somebody. Okay, the last month. I did a few things. Went to the Black Boy art show in Atlanta, and I saw some tremendous work. I saw some work that, I don't say put me to shame, but it definitely made me think about what I was doing and how I need to approach my work. What it benefited me in a highly. Also, part of that time, I spent time with my son, my oldest son. We drove across the country. We drove over 700 miles there and 700 miles back, not in all in one day. The first day we stopped over in Meridian, Mississippi. That's where my mother was born. So it was a very important stop for me. I got a chance to breathe in some of that air, that ancestral air. And then we went on to Atlanta, and then we came straight back. But we also made a stop in at Wiley College in Marshall, Texas, and got an opportunity to visit Melvin Tolson's memorial and statue, his landmark, his marker in the college at the Wiley College, and he has always been a very inspiration. He's been a creator. He's been somebody who helped the young students there win a debate contest, and so there were some things on this trip that meant a whole lot to me, more than the money I spent. And I did, sell a few paintings. I got my word out there. I got my name out there, and so, those are the type of things that were important. Got a chance to wear a Freaknik shirt. Freaknik. If y'all don't know, you better ask somebody. Freaknik was off the chain. It was during the time that we were coming together as a people during spring break, and they canceled it. They stopped it, but that doesn't mean that it doesn't still live on. I think they made a documentary about it. And you know, it had potential. It had a lot of potential. We should still be doing it. I don't know if it'll be recreated like that again. Hopefully, it is done in a more positive way, I guess. But we definitely need to focus on coming together as a people. Um, Also, this month, excuse me, last month, I saw a great movie. The movie was entitled Sinners. I'm not going to talk about it. I'm going to let you go see it for yourself. Uh, the movie, when I left out of the movie theater, the first thing I said was, we should have never left Africa. And if you see the movie and see it from the way I looked at it, you might understand that. You might get a little bit of that. But it's really important for you to focus on the fact that this was a young brother who created a movie, not independently, but pretty much his own vision, his own thoughts. He put it together in a. I mean, it was a masterful piece of work. It had its flaws, which I came to come to realize later after listening to a interview by him, that makes me, rethink the movie and the purpose and the reason behind it. But like I said, there was, nobody's born uh, conscious or to the point of their revolution is just so intact that there's no flaws in it. So, in everything that I do, there's always going to be some flaws. There's always going to be something that I'm going to do that I didn't get right. I didn't express correctly. I didn't, put it down on paper. But then there's another side, and this is the scientific part of this, is that, uh, you know, what I'm saying is not up for right or wrong or debate. You know, I'm trying to put out some evidence based information that it's not based on my belief. It's based on just the material reality that we live in. And if I'm mistaken, if I correction needs a correction, that's fine. But we will definitely gonna be building upon the ideas of what the material reality has created. Now, there are certain things that can't be refuted that are the basis of my scientific investigation. Number one, that African people were enslaved in this country. There's no way around that. I don't have to be woke to understand that. You can be sleep and understand that. We were enslaved in this country. We did uh, 400 years of slavery in this country. We were robbed from Africa. We were stolen from Africa. We were raped from Africa. We were murdered from Africa. These are realities. We were beat. We were tortured. We were maimed. All of those things cannot be refuted. And for people today to think that that doesn't have an impact on the way I think or the way the world looks to me, then they're highly mistaken. There's no way I can, walk around that, maneuver around that. Every thought that it comes out of my mouth has always related to that incident. I don't know any other incident other than that of our people. That's another curse or another cruelty, another dilemma that we're faced with. So what do I have to do? I have to create that reality. I have to create what then if is the world that I would live in if I was never there with intrusion, if the bloodline was kept, right? If the heritage of my people was intact. So that's just unrefutable. The other evidence refuted can't be refuted is that this land that we're on was once belonged to the indigenous people of whatever they chose to call it, and they were murdered, they were robbed, they were beaten, they were raped, they were stolen, they were maimed, they were tortured beyond measure. And we sit on this land somewhat thinking that all we have to do is acknowledge that and we'll be okay. No, from my point of view, that's not okay. there's a large amount of redress that needs to happen, and it won't happen through this government. African people won't get reparations from this country. That's that's a fact. It hasn't happened yet. So prove me wrong. Prove me wrong. Prove me wrong that this country will give you reparations, and I'll shut up. Prove me that this country will give the land back to the indigenous people that are left after their genocide. That's evidence. So when I speak, you have to remember that that constantly is reverberating in my thoughts. That cannot be taught out of me. You can't out, you know, change the way you teach somebody to the point that they're so brainwashed that they forget that those realities. They forget that that has actually existed. So, and then that goes in context with some of the things that the Black Boy Art Show, Sinners, the movie, and one thing that I had really focused on last month, it was a sort of a sympathy for those who, for whatever reason, have chosen not to think from that perspective, the perspective that I've chosen to think from, because I don't feel like there's something wrong with them. I also feel like the ideas that have been placed in their head have caused them to not acknowledge it. Okay, and so in some ways that has been to our detriment. It has been to somewhat of our downfall. But I also feel like, in a lot of ways, I can't. I somewhat feel a little sorry that there's no way that they can see themselves differently than that. But what is it? But anyway, so there's that. Um, April was a very thought provoking. Going to the Black Boy Art Show, I got a chance to commune and be a part of an exhibit that had a tremendous amount of talent, a tremendous amount of understanding of art, and um, I was somewhat in awe. There were artists that I've never met before, I've never seen before, never heard of, but they have put something in my head that made me want to keep thinking about their ideas and focus on what they're doing. Um, the movie, Sinners, I think in a lot of ways that movie showed what you could do with film that I've never seen before. So that was interesting. I wasn't able, that was an, I love to watch movies and critique them. And, I left out of that movie with one critique, and that critique was that we should never have left Africa. And there's a lot to that movie. I don't want to give it away, but there was a whole lot that reminded me of that, and reminded me of how we need to move forward, okay, and address some of these societal ills. This torment, this structure that has tormented us for so long. Uh, Today is May 1st. This is International Workers' Day. Um, if you don't know now, you know. The struggle is not between what party you choose. The struggle is work with the working people. We need to get organized as a working class people. And if we can't, we have to look at why we can't. We have to draw on those things that keep us separated and make sure that those things are addressed, that they're acknowledged, that we assemble in a way that doesn't allow those things to deter us. But we definitely need to focus on the fact that uh, this country is run by billionaires, okay, and it's in trillions of dollars in debt to the Chinese. who are run a socialist government in a system of capitalism that is surrounding it. And, so it's kind of hard to critique socialism when you have such a powerful entity like the United States who um, promotes uh, capitalism. And the people that live within side of capitalism function in it like they don't even understand what's going on. I was reading today about the diet of the Western world, and it's ultra processed. And so the diseases, all the uh, the ills that go on in your life living in this state uh, are being looked at as being part of the problem with you suffering, from cancer, diabetes, depression, you name it. The worst ills that you might have with inside the society are a lot to do with um, the inflammation. And not saying inflammation is bad, because you do need inflammation. This is what I learned. That you do not inflammation is not bad. It's inflammation. It needs to have a certain amount of that to combat whatever is affecting your body, the infection that is affecting your body. But it can't have too less of an inflammation or too much inflammation. Okay. And trying to when you lose control of the inflammation, that's when you have a problem. But I'm not here for that. I'm not no doctor. I read a little bit, and so now I'm sharing that knowledge. But I definitely don't know much about it. It's interesting, and I'm trying to get better. Okay. Um, so yeah, but the system that we live under is toxic, very toxic, and it causes toxicity even if you don't live in this system. And we have a serious problem with thinking that um, we can be in denial of that. We can walk around acting like, well, the things that I'm dealing with are more important. I got to watch the game, and I got to go to the movies, I got to eat, you know, and I've always thought about that there's people in this world who don't have TVs. They don't live they live very bland food, and they also uh, are a lot more in connection with their families and their communities due to the poverty that they live in. Um, and I believe that before we can all come up, that we need to focus on those who can't come up. And I've always had a philosophy that if it's good for me, then it has to be good for everyone else, or it's not good for me, and it can't be good for everyone else. And I think that that is one of the problems I have with why I can't focus on just forgetting about the things that go on in the world, because of my philosophy. You know, uh, I can tell you that there's a whole lot of things that go on in this country that are not good for me, that I'm a part of, and are not good for everyone else. Okay, as a direct result. And if I don't talk about that, if I don't bring that up, then you know I'm adding to the problem. I'm a part of the problem. So like I said, this is a retake of what I was thinking about yesterday and trying to do this for April. Um, I don't know if I covered everything. I'll try to limit what I say because I want to hold off on certain things because we're in May now, and I want to have a May uh, uh, broadcast too, and that might happen within the next few days. So this will be a to be continued because I got to get two in May. But yeah, so we definitely have a geopolitical shifting right going on. a paradigm shift where they're the countries of the BRICS. This is Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa are forming a different economic unit, a different economic bond that will allow anything that the G7 tried to do to prevent, like if there's a sanction placed on one of those countries, if it's you know, some type of economic, warfare is being waged against any of those countries, they can work within each other to battle it without any need for the superpower of America, or its allies. So, that's an economic shift that I think we need to be very aware of. We already got one country in Africa that's in behind it. We need to focus on the continent of Africa becoming a unified socialist state, the United States of Africa. And building a bond with the rest of the world that reflects our interests. Reflects what we feel is important, and not the interests of the so-called G7, who have basically monopolized the world for the last 70, 80 years, and have basically used Africa as their, resource bowl, just taking what they will and doing what they want. And we need to focus on that and bring that up every time somebody brings up something else about who we are as a people. All right. So I'm going to get into this artwork and let you tell you what I'm trying to do here. This episode is called Creators. I left a quote in the comment section, and I'm going to read it real quick. When you see people call themselves revolutionary, always talking about destroying, but never talking about building or creating, they're not revolutionary. They do not understand the first thing about revolution. It's creating. And that was Kwame Ture. I'm glad I was able to read that and get that in, because in a lot of ways, that's a powerful quote. I met Kwame Ture, multiple times when I was in college. Matter of fact, I was the person that brought him to the campus, paid his way to make it there. And I was also part of the organization that brought him there, the All African People's Revolutionary Party. And so it was an honor to me to meet with him and chop it up with him and talk to him, not like some celebrity, but it's a real person, somebody down to earth. Now, I was always very careful in bringing up a question to Kwame, because Kwame, simple questions, he'll break down complicated. Okay. Not to say he'll ever call your question stupid, but you kind of walked out of there feeling like, dang, I learned a whole lot from asking that simple question, which I thought was a simple question. He turned it into a complex answer that made me have to start rethinking how I talk to people, how I explain things, right? But yeah, so we're gonna get into these paintings, okay, that I'm working on. Okay, so we have these two. We have these two paintings. I have another painting I'm working on here, and I'm not going to show you that painting, but it's called Detachment, and it's going to be heavy. It's going to be real heavy. This one here on the floor is called the sustainability of recalculating empire. And you see my boy Kemet back there. He's getting a little drink. Don't mind Kemet. And then this painting is called Backwards Never, the one up on the easel. And they're not finished. They'll probably look totally different when they are, but the ideas behind them are powerful. The one on the floor here comes with a sister of mine who feels very strongly about reproduction and women's health and mental health. And I sit and listen to her, and I was listening to her speak about the character in Black Panther uh, movie, Wakanda Forever. Suri, who was a scientist who actually became Black Panther. But I just kind of, stole the idea from her because as I was listening, she was talking about the uh, the ability to use some Legos to kind of recreate Suri's lab. So this is supposed to be a lab, and she's working on a digital board, and she's in a kind of a lower, like a cave kind of environment. And above her are these ancestors who are sitting there watching over her as she, delves into solving this problem. And so it's going to be a very creative. I think it's going to be very interesting painting once it gets finished. And it definitely is in line with how I look at the future, this African built future. So I need to constantly keep pushing that idea. And this was one way of doing it. The other one here, and sometimes I look at that painting, I look like the eyes are a little cross-eyed. But once I get it fully painted, hopefully it won't still be like that. But I also am trying to approach this a little differently too. Um, when I look at art, I think about the different kind of artists that I've admired and I've come up with. There's some great artists, uh, women artists that I have kind of followed. Um, One is Kara Walker. Uh, there's the other Faith. Uh, I want to say I don't want to get it wrong, so I'm just going to say Faith. The other one is Amy. I'm not going to I don't want to mess up their last names, but they're Amy especially was doing some work that I really admired because it's contemporary, and I tend to I tend not to think about my work from a contemporary standpoint. I tend to look at my work as a conceptual, more futuristic, more out there kind of approach. And but I want to show people that I can do that type of work, right? And so this figure, this face, this backwards never will focus on uh, the ability of my talent to recreate this human in this human form in this futuristic world. Um, and so more of my drawings have become less kind of animated or cartoonish, and more and more delivering kind of a realism, you know, um, to set the tone for the rest of the painting. Uh, because some of the painting is somewhat futuristic too, but I also will try to incorporate kind of contemporary methods of architecture and style that also generate some uh, feeling of contemporary art. And I think I do that only to prove that I can do it. I don't feel like I have to continue to do it. I just want this series of paintings are called the decolonializing the space, taking it to the next phase. So in a lot of ways, not only is the artwork going to have certain motifs, which is it meaning that there's always going to be some black and white elements, there's always going to be this futuristic element, and there's always going to be some nature. And I'm working with those motifs to develop this idea around decolonializing the space. Um, and I've been now probably in about halfway through the series. These will probably be I probably do about 3 or 4 more paintings in this fashion. But the attempt was to basically decolonialize my thinking. And part of decolonializing my thinking was so I could take whatever that was to another phase in the way I think. And I've already kind of come up with that next phase, which I'm plan on doing next year. and that's going to be called Deep Fake. That's Depfake. And but I got to first finish this series of paintings, give myself a break, put on a show in October uh, 25th, 26th. Be at the African American Museum here in Dallas. You'll get that opportunity to see this work in its finished form, and also inviting other artists to come on to and be a part of this. And we're gonna have some music, we're gonna have some food, we're gonna have some vendors, we have some other type of entertainment. So it should be a good show. I mean, I'm hoping it will. And but like I said, getting back to the work, the architecture in the background um, will, I will be attempting to bring that into a lot more solid form, making it look a lot more realistic. Uh, the man that is looking, you know, not looking backwards, right? But looking backwards, never, meaning that, the idea is that sometimes we spend too much time in the past, and it causes us to believe more in what is going on in the past as being correct than rather what we could do in the future. And I can understand that looking forward in the future is you have to kind of look blindly. You have to kind of look without any reference points. But you also, I guess, in some ways, I'm trying to create reference points, points that if you are looking forward, if you are looking for the future and not looking backwards, backwards never, then you must see something, right? So this whole idea of this whole series of paintings is always going to include the Industrial Maintaining Organization, and this is a new society, a new way of thinking that is always focused on uh, work, people working, they're maintaining that work, and they're maintaining that work in an organization. And I think that the possibilities within inside the IMO are boundless. There's no escaping the possibilities of what this world could lead to. So this decolonializing the space is not only breaking down within me the ideas that kind of have kept me a little bit, stuck and rigid and, angry. And once I'm able to do that, I can open up more into a, a decolonialized space, right? So it's not, and that space, you know, would break down a lot of, my thoughts that have kind of carried me through this phase, and it's been amazing this whole period of time when I just put that out there, how much information has come to me around that I spend a lot of time studying African history, and I know that you know colonialism had was probably, if not worse than slavery, but they were pretty much part and parcel. They went hand in hand. You couldn't have had colonialism if you first didn't brain drain Africa, right? And so Africa was removed of its youth, of its its mind power, and they were sent to you know uh, all across the world, doing all these great things for you know everybody but Africa, right? And then on the same tip, since they had conquered these lands, they started dividing them up. All these countries that you see in Africa, they weren't divided up by African people. We didn't come up with these, borders and boundaries, that we're now in somewhat sometimes even conflicts over. Uh, these were all divided part of this last 500 years. Africa, what I had learned, lived in circles. There were circles that described the way people grouped themselves in Africa, and those circles were up next to each other, right? And you knew the circle that you were in. Some circles were larger, some circles were smaller, but those circles were always their demarcation. So if we're talking about what Africa may look like in the future, we might have circles of influence in Africa, right? And getting back more to the way we thought as a people, not this, rigid, economic division is done over resources and land, and that has nothing to do with the people that were living there in the first place, just kind of, forced upon. So yeah, so like I said, this has no boundaries. There's no agency. We have an ability to live without agency. Okay, and it can be okay. It can be all right. But these paintings will reflect a lot of what I consider to be, my has been my creative source. I have been thinking about this since I was around 17, 18 years old. And I felt like there was a lot of things that I just wanted to change. I always lived under this kind of understanding that everything that was around me, uh, what if it changed? What if the world that I envisioned was something that was not present, but it was actually in the future. So that was always my imagination. And I think that in a lot of ways, because of that, I didn't follow a lot of the rules. Like I didn't go to art school, and which I did, and got a degree in art, but I didn't follow the rules as being like, let me show my art teacher what they think about my work. I went to art school and I took the lessons that were taught to me and created my own work outside of class. And I kind of did that same approach with my education because, yeah, I went to college and I got, I was a D student. I always was proud of that because I got most of my education through the All African People's Revolutionary Party while I was there on campus, which we had to do. We read about, I don't know, it was a bunch of books. We read a bunch of books, and there was a certain level that you need to achieve within that I wanted to achieve. I achieved that, and those type of things have always, like my art, have always guided me, further along than anything that, and like I said, I have to have sympathy for folk because if you were raised in a society, you thought you needed to get a degree, you needed to listen to these instructors, and there was no teachers or no instruction that said you need to go out there and think on your own. You need to take what I've learned and then take it on your own and research it to make sure you can prove that it is right, which the party helped me to do, and my artwork, because I also felt like my artwork was, yeah, I wanted to do this, you know. I was saying that I wanted to create African art when everybody around me telling you ain't African. So, you know, you know, th- those type of questions have always resonated with me in my work, is in the way I speak, in the way I talk, and you know, I'm trying to be free, y'all. I'm trying to get the freedom that I deserve, that I think we all deserve. And I think sometimes we're held back because we have to kind of feel like we have to fit a mold, we have to fit a certain type of belief system. And that I don't think you're gonna grow that way. I don't, I've always believed that I never uh, uh, followed the rules. I've done a lot of things. I've been in a lot of different organizations. I've been in a lot of different companies, and all along that time, I felt like I was going somewhere. I still feel like I'm going somewhere, and I think when you start feeling like you're stuck, because are in a rut, then that rut or that way of thinking is going to carry on with you. You're going to always feel like that, and you know, I'm willing to change. I'm ready to change. Matter of fact, I change all the time. Change is constant. So I have to be more comfortable with change because I understand it. I understand what it means, it's important it is. So even, whenever I pick up some new information, pick up something that I learned, it changes me. I put that into the data bank, and I make sure that makes it a different algorithm, right? And so, that's the kind of approach that I've had to my creativity. Um, there's, like I said, there's plenty of ways to be creative, and I encourage you to be a creator, not an innovator, rather than a follower, or you know, a robot. You know, Somebody had to build the robot. Be that person, okay? Don't be the robot, okay? Be the person that speaks out. Not the person that feels like they got to shut up. And But you have to be able to, everybody knows themselves. Everybody knows who they are. They know their capabilities. They know their flaws, and you don't want to do steps too far outside of your boundaries. Okay, that you've created, right? Into something that you might step into that has nothing to do with you. So yeah, I'm very careful about who I associate myself with. Even doing this YouTube video is somewhat pushing my boundaries because but I do it in such a way that I know that I'm still in my own boundaries because you know I ain't pushing this thing no further than what the internet has provided. So I'm cool with that. I'm all right with that, and it's somewhat like my diary, and I'm able to get on here and talk a little bit, and hopefully someday somebody gonna listen. I know this is all owned by YouTube, and they can shut me down anytime, but who's listening? So they ain't tripping on it. At least I hope they ain't, because this one I had to redo, and I'm trying to figure out why. But I think I do remember yesterday that there was some kind of internet kind of glitch, and it said I needed to restart this, and I did, and I just kept going. And so, and it happened early in the broadcast, so I think that might have been it. But getting back to this whole idea of running these shows is it's trying to let you know who I am, what art means to me, or what craft means to me, which I choose to be, equivalent, and the process, lessons on drawing, lessons on painting, lessons on digital work. If you notice the picture on the front of this YouTube exhibit or YouTube show was a falcon, and it's called Falcon Perched on Africa. And that's another story. I mean, I can get into it, but I don't know if I have all the time. But Falcon Perched on Africa, you know, I feel like I try to put together some simple ideas that are very complex in their meaning. And I don't want to get into the complexity of the meaning. I want to keep it real simple. So sometimes I don't really want to talk about the complexity of a simple image, but I'll leave you guys with this idea too, is that uh, you can look at the smallest, you can focus on the smallest crevice or thing out there that you're in your environment, right? Part of your heritage, right? And see some beauty in it. And not to say that I'm going to draw a rock and tell you to look for the beauty in it, but there is. And I know that that's what when I do something very simple, um, I want you to see the beauty in it without me having to tell you that. And I think if we focus more on some of the simpler things, the little things in life, we might be able to open up and deal with some of the bigger problems, or see the bigger picture, and, focus on making some real change in this world, right? Some real things need to happen. Some really things need to go. So I got about 10 more minutes, and I don't want to keep rambling. So I'm going to try to figure out something to say. But yeah, so coming up, like I talked about, decolonizing the space. Uh, Take me to the next phase will be the craft show. My work in that show will be called Conjecture. Um, and I have a little flyer here for it. Conjecture, and it's the natural progress of imagination and the creative mind. So this just worked perfectly for this show, this exhibit. Okay, you see that? Hopefully y'all get involved with that. You see the little QR code down there. You can go to africaonthemove.com. You can get some more information. There's an Eventbrite page. You can order you some tickets. You can do both days for a low price right now. You can do uh, one day. Uh, just come on out, right? And I'm going to talk more about conjecture as I get closer to the event, and the paintings are more complete. But yeah, that's been another part of my life that has been very important. You see, it's October 25th and October 26th. Okay, you get that information, get one of these. You can learn a little bit more about what I do, how I do it, and come on out and tell your friends, tell your family. It's gonna be nothing X-rated, uh, but it will definitely be something that you want to see and observe. And I'll have some prints for sale. So come on out and be a part of that event. But yeah, I think that doing these YouTubes are important for my growth and my development. Helps me to think out some thoughts and put some things together, and also let people know about what I'm doing. Uh, you can go to africaonthemove.com. I've been working on some digital prints. I gotta put more about drawings up. I've been really working on a lot of drawings lately, and also planning on what the artwork is going to look like next year. And it's gonna be super. It's gonna be dynamite. It's gonna be awesome. It's gonna be it's gonna be supernatural. Supernatural. Okay, that's one of them words, right? Supernatural. I mean, it can't just be natural. I didn't put supernatural on here. I said the natural progression of imagination and creative mind, right? Ain't nothing got to be super about your natural progression and your imagination of the creative mind. So, we got to get out of this idea that things have to be super for them to be work for us, right? We don't have to be superheroes, okay? Matter of fact, sometimes them superheroes, it ain't working for us anyway, right? You ever go to the movies and see a superhero and be wishing and be rooting for the villain? That's the type of brother I was. So I never really felt very much for the superhero. I think when I was younger, I might have, but I always thought the villains, had the harder job, right? They had to, and but one thing, the villains they always make the villains look a little stupid, right? Because they'd always get a hand up, they'd always tell everybody what they're gonna do, and it made it real simple for the superhero to come in and knock him down. I'm like, why you tell him that? That's all he needed. What he ain't got no superpower. All he got to do is listen to what you saying, which is some super stupidity, right? So, so there's that. I always, we gotta do better. You gotta be better to do better, right? And so I'm truly trying to fill in some information here. Uh, but yeah, learn about May Day. Learn what's the most important part of uh, this day, the International Workers' Day, which started here in this country, and but it was squashed, and it was, in fact, people don't even celebrate it here as well as they do around the world. I think this year they might be celebrating it a little more due to the economic conditions that we're living under. But it's only one day, but it should be happening throughout the year. Okay, we should be constantly working on building a stronger working class community, making sure that everyone in that community is being well served, especially the children. We need to give children's rights. I got a chance to spend some time with my son, and he helped me on my trip to Atlanta, and for the first, I don't know if it's the first time, but I really got an opportunity to, really talk to him and listen to him and respect, his opinion and his ideas in a way that I wish I had done that more sooner. I have another son. I try to do the same with him, but really everybody. I think I've learned a lot more about the rights of children that adults tend to stomp, and tend to squash and get in the way of, and there's no good reason. It's just that's what we do, and as adults, and definitely upholding this month, Mother's Day, and the women of the world and the mothers that have brought us here. I got to get in more into this idea that I've pretty much concluded that you know our mothers are our creator. Period. You know, any man-made notion of religion was only done because they're a man, okay? And they violent, right? And we're violent. We're gonna prove that we have a you know superior supernatural being, you know, just to continue our own nonsense, right? But I'm gonna get more into that too um, as it goes on. But I have a belief system that has always been centered around my mother, my grandmother, my wife, all of the people that have been important to me in my life, my sisters, my daughters, not to say that my sons and my father and other people didn't matter, but I don't we fathers and sons all had mothers too. Okay. And it has a lot to do with respecting uh, and knowing that any true revolution is going to liberate women first. Okay. And if they don't get liberated, if our children don't get liberated, how can we say we liberated? Okay. And so I ask for you and everyone that's listening to respect, mothers, and understand the oppression, exploitation, that goes on and the sexism that goes on against them, in a way that uh, truly can change the world if we focus on that alone, right? Or just changing the way we treat children, can be just as powerful, right? Because who is the one who is that child came from, right? It's a mother, right? We didn't come from dad, okay, or the father, right? And so we have to be better at protecting them, not and not in a sense of physically protecting, but protecting, our thoughts against them, right? Making sure that our thoughts against them are are shielded from their reality, right? And so there's a lot to that. Hopefully I got that out, explained it correctly. But yeah, this is the Namo Kofi Joe. You listening to the Roof is on fire. We don't need no water. Let that. Maybe that might hurt me, so I'm gonna cut that line out too. But you can go to africaonthemove.com. You can see all my socials. You can see all my work, all my paintings. And you can become involved too. I got about a minute left. Hopefully one day I'm gonna get some people on here and we can share some of this knowledge together. And if so, that might be a good thing. May not. But remember, this month we will have Malcolm X birthday. It's really May 19th, but we're gonna celebrate on the 18th, right? And then African Liberation Day, which is May 25th, we're gonna celebrate that too. We're gonna make sure we remain conscious, we move forward, we stay awake. We don't let folks stomp on our dreams, okay? And we're gonna keep it 100, okay? 100. All right. from 1925 to 2025. Okay, we keeping it 100. Okay. Malcolm X speaks, he lives forward.